So I think in the eligibility question, you just got to look at the historical admissions rates around that. So, something like Stanford, I think the average score for the SATs last year was 2247. So that works out to about, what, 745 each section? So you want to think of, they want to be at least at the median, right, to be considered. And I would say this much: if you really want your kid in that school, apply. And he wants or she wants to go to that school, apply. If they're competitive. If you're a 3.3, you're not going to apply to Stanford, right? But if you're a 4.2 and happen to be able to play a mean piano, yeah, maybe you do. Secondly, around the financial question, the financial aid? Okay, this is the tough one. If you do, most of the schools now, fortunately, particularly Stanford is one of them, does the, let me go back. It does the single choice early action, so you're not committed, so you have some leverage there. But there are some schools in the Ivy League that still do. The Ivy League, the big ones that do single choice early action are Harvard, Yale, and Stanford, the three that I can think of off the top of my head. I think Brown does early decision. Like, they require it. Cornell, early decision. So, yeah, you do give up some leverage there, and it's a question. And again, the way, particularly the Ivies work these days, the average financial packages are north of $35,000. So it depends on what the family can bring to the table financially. So it may be a couple $1,000s here or there. It might be more than that, but it's not. I would say if it's a question of, like, I can go to Stanford or I can go to UC Santa Barbara and Stanford's going to cost me $5,000 or more, I'm going to pay for that every time, right? So I think it's that, figuring out how to do it. And lastly, the third part was the question of admissions, of applicability, finances, and what was the third one? I'm sorry. So they don't really say. That's the hard thing about it. You can't really know. I mean, you might think your child is incredibly gifted and be the person. There's a great story out there about a student who was, I want to say he was 4.3 or 4.4 and perfect SATs, and he got rejected by all seven of the Ivies that he applied to, and he sued, right? And I get it. But the problem was that he, unfortunately, falls into this pool of uber achievers, and so it becomes very difficult to determine whether or not that person is at. And that's why I push, and why we at Test Magic push so heavily, is the uniqueness side. Go out and find something that you love doing, or your kid loves doing, and do it. So many kids out there, you see them, they look like they have the platinum resume. Like they should be going out and applying to Google for the next job. But that's not what they want only. They want some of those, but they want students who were the kid who raced BMX bikes all through high school, even though none of his friends still did. Or they want the friend who went out and surfed because that's what he loved doing, or collected bugs because he was interested in that. But he did it for a long time. They want that person because that person brings a different perspective, and they want a class composed of those different perspectives. And that's why you talk about, like, especially as a parent, intervening is maybe not the right word, but encouraging early on. You like this? Great. My daughter swims. She's pretty darn good at it. I love it. I encourage it because kids in athletics have such a strong correlation to performance in academics. But it's also because she does something that she loves, and she gets up every morning and swims, and if she keeps doing it, she may not become Michael Phelps or the female version of it, but she loves it, and it's going to show over time. So I would say that. Find what your thing is, what your child's thing is, and get them to do it. Make that possible, okay? I hope that answers your question. I don't know if it's... So, again, the big thing to draw from this slide is that early decision, early action, you want to get in line as early as possible, right? So get yourself in line early so you get that consideration. If you don't make it here, if you're not rejected, you're deferred, you get thrown into the pool anyways. So you get reconsidered for the next round. Because when you do early decision, early action, they have three options. They can accept, they can reject, or they can defer. And accept and defer, accept is the best, obviously. Reject is the worst. Defer is not necessarily bad. You get dropped back into the next pool. You're reconsidered. And they tend to have around, from what we can get, and the numbers are somewhat shaky, about a 10% chance after that. Okay? All right. So let's talk a little bit about some things that have changed recently. Is everyone here familiar with what the Common Application is? Okay, let me explain this to you. A number of schools, private universities, got together and realized that it was really, really hard for students to fill out 20 different applications for 20 different universities. It was an unfair expectation. And so they constructed this application that could be used across the board, right? So your student will fill out this thing called the Common Application. It's at commonapp.org, and they will use that to apply to Stanford, to NYU, to Harvard, to Yale, to Johns Hopkins, all of these. Now, each one of these universities will have additional essays and additional things you have to do, but you only make that application once. All right? And this has been the standard for a long time. They've made some changes. And this year, the biggest change they made was they changed the essay. And for a lot of students, this is really, really traumatic because they've had the same topics, the same prompts for the essay for the last, I want to say, 16 years. So as a student, you could kind of get prepared. You'd be like, oh, I'm going to choose one of these 6. It's no longer that, okay? But they've done a couple other things too, and this is a recognition of how important the essay has become. The new essays on the Common App here are longer. They've added 150 extra words, which may not sound like a lot, but it really gives sense to how important the essay is and what role it plays in the overall application process. Yes, the application process and the admissions process is a numbers game, but it's becoming less so, and it's so critical to be able to do this. And they've had new prompts. And the big thing about the new prompts here is that they had a prompt that was basically choose your topic. God, that's just good, huh? You just choose whatever you want. That went away. And now students have to respond to prompts that are really about reflecting on things that have happened in their lives and how they relate to this particular university or particular university experience now. All right? And this goes back to that question about students going, oh, my life's boring. I go to school every day. I go with my friends. We go to camp. We do these things. They need to find things to answer these questions. All right? And they're really, really critical. Come by the booth. I'll give you guys a list of the new questions because we can show you. They're really interesting what they've come out with. And they've drawn a lot from some of the supplemental questions that the universities have used. Finally, and this is interesting too, is they used to be where you could turn in a Microsoft Word or a PDF. So you could fudge a little bit because the old limit was 500 words. You might turn on an essay that's 512, 515 because it really says what you want to say. No, you can't do that anymore. When you turn in your essay, you plug it into the file, the format on the website, and it's 650 words. It lets you type no more. That's it. So this has to be an incredibly well-tailored and crafted essay. Okay? And it used to be that you could include images to really add to it. You can't do that anymore. It is strictly words. They are looking for how well you write and how well you answer the question and show the way you think. And that's a hard thing to do at age 17. It's hard enough to do for me at age 46. Okay? All right. So essays, yeah. So I believe he asked whether or not you have to use the Common App to apply to schools. Some schools will allow you to apply directly, but I don't know which they are. But there's not a real advantage to doing that because you can specify each school. You say, and it's general information, right? And then they say, oh, you're applying to NYU. Well, these are the 6 other questions you have to answer for NYU. They have a supplemental package. No, you can use it to apply as many people as many schools you want to make admissions to, and cut the check for and think you stand a chance. Apply, right? So, coming back to a little bit, just quickly, why Test Magic does what it does now. Test Magic is all about recognizing the trends in what's going on in admissions, and essays have become this really critical component. And we recognize that it's really hard to write a good essay, and we also recognize that the essays themselves are becoming incredibly critical in the overall evaluation. Most schools now use what's called a holistic process, where they look at the numbers, but that's just part of it. And the essay is part of it. That storytelling is part of it. And the activities are part of it. And how that all fits together in regards to the needs of the university. Okay? So one thing we found a lot, I've finally found, is that my students can write decent essays, but they don't write essays that are really, in this case, tailored to that school. And I'll give you guys an example. This just here, I had a student, 4.36 GPA, really sharp, fairly strong SATs as well, and wrote really functional, clearly written essays. But they were basically the same essay, answering the same question over and over again. And if you're a college admissions officer, you pick that up in a second. And so what we did was we pulled that essay out and said, look, you want to go to Northwestern for pre-med. Why Northwestern? Because think about it, this is a courtship. The school is courting your child, and your child is courting the school. And they want to know, why us? Why do you love us and not Harvard or Stanford? And you want to know, why do you love me and not my next door neighbor who's really good as well? So what we did with her, she said, look, let's tell a little bit more about your story. And this woman had a really interesting story. Her grandmother, born and raised in China, lived here in the States now, used to make these kind of traditional remedies for her. She was a runner, and she always get these injuries in her legs. And her grandmother would make these remedies for her out of stuff she'd buy in an apothecary. And she didn't really understand what they were doing, but they worked. In fact, they worked oftentimes better than the stuff she bought from Walgreens. And I said, but she said, I always wondered why. I wondered the chemistry of that. And Northwestern has this great program with a pharmacology company outside of Chicago that looks into traditional remedies and the sciences behind them. And so we drafted an essay that said, this is what she came from. My grandma used to do this. And as a student of chemistry, I was really curious why that is. And now I see that you have this program there that's going to let me extend that. And suddenly Northwestern says, wow, you are a fit. Not, I want to go to Northwestern because you're a great school and I want to go to med school. We can all say that. It's finding those links that make you stand out. So where your numbers are good, the numbers are equal across the way, but you suddenly jump up because you say, oh, I looked, and I see why I love you. It's this reason, and here's why. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's hard to do that even as an adult, right? So you need to be able to have someone working with your student to help them get that point across, right? And that really comes from knowing. Most of the students that we work with at Test Magic are students that we taught SAT to. So I've known them for a year and a half. They've been in front of me for 2 days a week. I hear their stories. I can talk about them. And if you don't have that kind of relationship with them, it's hard to really come up with something strong. So you want to establish something early on, and I'll tell a little bit about that in a bit. Okay? So extracurricular activities. Now I like this. This is kind of dated. Jerry Millen was so hip last year, but now he's in Houston, and we don't like him as much anymore. He's not in New York, the sexy place, but he's still a great basketball player. But he's a great example of someone who his parents encouraged him to do something. I mean, it was unusual to have, let's face it, unusual to have an Asian guy playing point guard for the New York Knicks. It had never happened before, and he is darn good. So he was encouraged to pursue something he loves. And what those activities can be, as I said before, can be anything. They can be athletic, they can be based in community service, they can be tied into cultural diversity. Join clubs that are not like you. Go and join, I'll go join the Korean American Club, even though I'm Caucasian. Why not? I get cross-cultural experience, I learn about a culture I don't know very much about, and I look interested, and I stay involved. So encourage your kids to go out and check things out like this. Again, some of the kids work. Part-time jobs are a great component of who they are. I worked all through high school. And I didn't realize how much that mattered. You just seem like, oh, I'm supposed to. I need to earn some money. I wanted to buy a car. But these are parts of the story. Encourage your kids to do these things, okay? Let's see. So another thing I want to talk about, too, is all of us, I think, maybe not, but a lot of us are really, really obsessed with the brand name. I would love for my child to go to Stanford, even though I went to USC. It would hurt me, but I would be okay. I even accept her going to UCLA, which is our arch rival, because it's a great school. But the numbers are hard. But it doesn't mean that they can't go to top-tier universities with top programs in what they want to study and increase their chances. And I'll give you examples here. So MIT is considered the best engineering school in the United States. 9.5%